The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of dust and silence beneath a sky painted in fire and ash. At dusk the world bled crimson, shadows crawling long across the cracked earth. Coyotes sang their lonely hymn to the fading light, and the wind carried the scent of dry sagebrush, whispering like the ghost of a prayer too faint for heaven to hear. It was in this place of vastness and echo that a man lived alone. His cabin leaned tired against the land, boards warped by sun and rain, its chimney coughing smoke only when he had the will to gather wood. The townsfolk said he was once a ranch hand of decent skill, a man who knew the strength of rope and the rhythm of horse hooves. But that was years ago, before life folded him inward, before sorrow settled in his bones like winter frost that never melted. He had no family now, no friends to sit across the table, no laughter to warm his walls. Loneliness was his companion, and silence his shadow. He had grown used to the emptiness, though sometimes in the still hours before dawn he wondered if his own heart had forgotten how to beat. Yet there was something else, something he carried not only in his soul, but in his flesh. A mark of strangeness, a reminder of what he could not explain. A lump. It had started small, no bigger than a coin, tucked beneath his shoulder blade. At first, he thought it was the price of hard work, a knot of muscle born from years of lifting, hauling, mending fences under the merciless sun. But weeks became months, and the swelling grew. The skin stretched tight and tender, sometimes throbbing as though it held a rhythm not his own. When he stripped his shirt before the cracked mirror, the candlelight caught the shape of it, an unnatural rise under the flesh, as if something pressed from the inside, yearning to escape. He would touch it lightly with calloused fingers, and the lump would quiver, alive, like a bird trapped beneath skin. He told no one, not the barkeep who sometimes caught his eye when he slipped in for whiskey, not the preacher who visited with pamphlets and pity, not even the old doctor who might have pressed cold hands against it and spoken words he feared to hear. He chose instead to bear it alone, as he bore all things. The people of the town called him cursed. Children dared one another to ride past his shack, their laughter sharp and cruel as stones thrown at a stray dog. Men muttered that sorrow had bent him, that he was a warning of what happens when life wins. Women whispered he had lost something once, something too precious, and the desert had swallowed his heart whole. He ignored them all. Yet sometimes at night, when the sky bloomed with stars brighter than fire, he would lift his eyes and ask into the silence, "Why me? Why this?" The stars, cold and ancient, gave no answer. One evening, the ache in his back pulsed so fiercely that it drove him to his knees. He bit the inside of his cheek until iron filled his mouth. Sweat beaded down his temple, dripping onto the dusty floorboards. For a moment, he feared he would die there, alone, nameless as a stone in the desert. But then it passed, the pain easing back into its steady throb. He stood again, breath ragged, and stared into the mirror. The candle flame wavered, painting his reflection in trembling light. His hollow eyes looked back, weary but unbroken. The lump beneath his skin shifted, and for the first time he thought he saw it glow faintly, as if a hidden ember smoldered deep within. He pressed his hand against it, whispering to no one, "What are you?" The only reply was silence. The wind rattled the window pane, and the desert beyond swallowed his words whole. And so he kept on living. Days faded into one another, like pages of a book left out in the rain. He worked when he must, mending his fence, fetching water from the creek, patching his roof against storms. Nights he sat by the fire, the crackle of wood his only companion, the ache in his back a reminder that he was never truly alone, even in solitude. The lump grew, his isolation deepened, and somewhere, beyond the horizon of his despair, fate waited patiently for the moment when silence would break. The days bled into one another, long and slow as molasses running in the cold. He woke at dawn to the call of crows, patched what needed patching, ate little, spoke less. Life had grown so thin it seemed at times he could see through it, as if each hour were just smoke drifting upward to disappear into the heavens. But fate has a way of stirring dust when the soul has grown too still. It began with a sound, the sharp crack of splintering wood carried on the wind. He looked up from his meager fire and saw her. A woman, strong in posture, yet softened by the weight of years, stood near her fence line down the slope. One post had given way, leaving her cattle restless and milling. She tugged at the rails with all her strength, but the wood held stubborn, unmoved by her effort. He watched for a long moment. He had not spoken to another soul in weeks. His throat had nearly forgotten the shape of words. But something in her struggle, the quiet determination, the way she pushed against the world despite its hardness, pulled him from the shadow of his silence. He set down his tin cup, rose slow as if remembering how to move, and crossed the dusty field. She noticed him as one notices a hawk circling overhead, wary, uncertain, but unwilling to turn away. Her eyes, a shade caught between storm and sky, studied his approach. The town had filled her ears with rumors about him. Cursed, broken, marked by something unnatural. Yet here he was, real and human, his hands scarred not by devils but by honest work. "You'll break your hands before you break that wood," he said, his voice rough, as though it had lain unused too long. She let the words settle in the air between them. Then quietly she stepped aside. Together they lifted the rails, wedged them back into place. He braced the post with his shoulder while she hammered it in with steady blows. Their movements said more than words could, a rhythm of shared effort, a recognition that two people, no matter how scarred, could carry weight better together. When the work was done, she offered him water from a clay jug. He drank, the coolness sliding down his throat like mercy itself. For a moment, he almost forgot the ache that pulsed in his back. She spoke then, not with the edge of curiosity, but with the gentleness of one who knew pain. "You live close," she said, her tone more observation than question. He nodded. Words came hard. Too close, some say. Her gaze lingered on him, steady, unflinching. Unlike the others, she did not look at him as though he were a shadow to be avoided. Instead, she saw him, saw the man beneath the silence. In the weeks that followed, their paths crossed more often. She would bring bread she had baked, wrapped in cloth, and leave it on his porch. He would repair a broken hinge on her barn door without asking. They spoke in fragments at first, like two rivers finding their way toward a meeting place. Slowly, the words grew longer, deeper. The town noticed, and the town disapproved. Whispers filled the saloon. "She's wasting kindness on a cursed man. Doesn't she know what he carries? She'll bring ruin on herself." And then there was the rancher, a man broad of chest, sharp of tongue, who had once sought her hand and failed. He carried bitterness like others carry pride, and he despised the sight of her speaking kindly to the lonely drifter. "She's a fool," the rancher spat one evening, whiskey burning in his throat. "Helping a man like that. He's rotten, you'll see. Nothing good grows from a bad root." But she was not swayed. Her strength was not loud, not boastful, but steady as river stone. She did not argue with the town, nor with the rancher. She simply continued to bring bread, to share words, to stand beside the man others called cursed. And slowly, something fragile began to stir between them. One evening, as the sky deepened into velvet and stars lit their lanterns above, he winced, a hand pressed to his back. She noticed, her brow folding with concern. "You're in pain," she said softly. He turned from her, ashamed. "It's nothing." But the truth pressed against his skin like fire. His breath grew ragged. Sweat glistened on his neck. She stepped closer, placing her hand gently against his shoulder. He flinched at first, unaccustomed to touch that carried tenderness instead of cruelty. "No one should suffer alone," she whispered. He trembled. For years he had borne the weight of silence, the strange and growing burden beneath his skin. And now here was someone who did not recoil, who did not turn away. Her hand rested near the place where the lump pulsed, and for the first time, he allowed it. Allowed her. The town mocked them more fiercely after that. "Madness," they said. "Witchcraft," others muttered. The doctor, when asked, shook his head. "That man carries something not meant for this world. I'll not touch it. Yet none of their words could undo the quiet bond that grew between the two. Each meeting was simple: a loaf of bread, a mended tool, a shared silence broken by a few words. Yet each carried more weight than the loudest declaration of love. For in their shared moments, they found what the world had denied them: understanding. The lump grew heavier, the nights more restless, and though he tried to hide it, she saw. She always saw. And one night, as the desert wind howled through the cracks of his cabin, he allowed himself a truth he had long buried. He did not want to face whatever fate lay ahead alone. Not anymore. The desert knows how to hold its breath before a storm. That night, the air itself seemed to wait. Clouds gathered thick as bruises over the horizon, and thunder rolled like the slow approach of judgment. The lonely man sat at his table, the fire guttering low, every breath weighted with the ache in his back. The pain had grown worse with each passing day. What once was a throb had become a pounding drumbeat deep beneath his skin. He could not lift a bucket without wincing. He could not lie down without feeling the lump swell as though it were alive. Some nights it burned so fiercely he feared it would tear him open, and still he told himself he would endure. But endurance has its breaking point. The storm broke just past midnight. Rain hammered the roof in wild fists. Lightning carved the sky into jagged pieces, and he fell to the floor with a cry torn from the hollow of his chest. His vision blurred. His breath came shallow. And the pain, oh, the pain was unlike anything he had known, sharp and unrelenting, as though something inside him had clawed to be free. She came running through the storm. The woman who had seen him not as cursed, but as human. She pushed open his cabin door, rain streaming from her hair and clothes, and found him writhing in the glow of a dying fire. Her voice broke through the thunder. "I'm here." She knelt beside him, slipping her arms around his shoulders as though to hold him together while the world sought to tear him apart. His back arched with agony, and then it happened. The lump burst, not with the gore the mind might conjure, not with rot or pus or any sickness. No, what spilled forth was something that made her breath still and her heart quake with awe. From beneath his skin came a shimmer of light, faint at first, then bright as a lantern set loose in the dark. It spilled across the floorboards, not liquid, not flame, but something in between, shards like crystal, feathers that glowed and dissolved into sparks, fragments of brilliance too strange for naming. It was as if the stars themselves had been hiding beneath his flesh, waiting for the moment they could scatter into the world. He gasped, half in terror, half in release. "What is happening to me?" She did not answer with fear. She did not recoil. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering through the storm. "You've carried this too long. Let come. You're not alone anymore." The light poured on, filling the room, catching on the tears in her eyes. She held him as his body shook, as if a lifetime of sorrow were spilling free with every glowing shard. The storm outside raged, but within the cabin there was another kind of storm, one born of mystery and strange beauty, one that neither heaven nor earth could fully explain. By morning, the rain had eased. The fire had burned down to soft ash. He lay weak, trembling, his shirt torn and his back raw where the lump had split. Yet he was alive, and scattered across the floor were remnants of the impossible, tiny crystalline pieces that pulsed faintly like the last breaths of fallen stars. She gathered them carefully, holding them in her hands as though they were holy. The townsfolk, hearing whispers of light and storm, came to see. They crowded outside his cabin, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. The preacher crossed himself, muttering of curses and signs. The barkeep shook his head, whispering of omens. The children clung to their mothers, eyes wide as saucers. And the rancher, broad and bitter, stepped forward with a sneer. "You see," he spat, "the man's not natural. He's marked. Nothing good can come from this." But the woman stood before them all, her hands full of that fragile light. Her voice did not rise in anger, yet it carried strength enough to still the murmurs. "He is no curse. He is no monster. He is a man who has borne suffering we could not imagine. And still he breathes. Still he endures. That is no curse. That is grace." The crowd shifted uneasy. Some turned away, muttering of devils. Others lingered, caught by the quiet fire in her words. And he, the man who had lived in silence for so long, looked upon her with eyes wet and unashamed. For the first time in years, he felt the weight within him ease, not because the burden had vanished, but because he no longer carried it alone. They sat together as dawn broke, the desert washed clean by rain, the shards of light scattered like jewels at their feet. And though the town whispered, though fear hung heavy in the air, something stronger bound them now. It was not born of beauty or ease. It was not born of the simple sweetness the world often confuses for love. No, it was born of recognition, of shared sorrow, of the bravery it takes to see another soul and not turn away. And in that moment, as the sun crept over the horizon and painted the land gold, he understood. Whatever had lived inside him, whatever strange miracle or curse had burst forth, it had led him here, to her, to the one who had stayed. Morning did not bring peace. Though the storm had passed, the town carried its own thunder. Word traveled quick, faster than hoofbeats, sharper than rattlesnake fangs. By noon, the saloon buzzed with stories. By evening, the church bell tolled, not for prayer, but for judgment. They called it a meeting. It was more a trial without law. The preacher stood at the front, Bible trembling in his hands, his voice loud, but his eyes uncertain. This man bears a mark unnatural. Light bursts from his flesh. We cannot look upon such things and pretend they are of God. We must choose. Do we let him stay among us? Or do we send him into the wilderness where such curses belong? Murmurs swelled. Some nodded, fear thick in their throats. Others hesitated, remembering the way he had once worked their fences, mended their tools, asked for nothing. The rancher seized a moment, his voice cutting through the crowd. You all saw it, or heard it. He's no man like us. He's dangerous. He'll bring ruin to this town. And that woman, his fingers stabbed the air toward her. She's blinded, bewitched. If we let this go on, we'll all pay the price. The crowd stirred, torn between fear and doubt. And then he came, weak still, pale from the night's agony, but standing. The woman walked at his side, steadying him with a touch at his elbow. His shirt hung loose, the wound at his back raw, but no longer bleeding. His eyes, once hollow, now held a strange calm. The calm of a man who has carried his cross and no longer fears the weight. He did not speak at first. He simply turned, slow, and lifted his shirt. Gasps rippled through the room. The scar was fresh, red as flame, but there was no rot, no sickness. Only the mark of survival. Only proof that he had endured. I am no curse, he said at last, his voice rough but steady. I am no omen. I am a man, broken perhaps, but still a man. What you saw come from me, I cannot explain it. I do not understand it myself. But tell me this. If I were cursed, would I not have fallen long ago? If I were a danger, would she stand by me still? He turned toward the woman, and she stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. You fear what you do not understand. But fear will not save you. Fear will only hollow you. This man has carried suffering in silence for years. And when it broke, what came forth was not poison, not death, but light. And if you cannot see the grace in that, then perhaps the curse is not his, but yours. Her words settled like stones in water, rippling through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, shamed. Others looked away, unwilling to be moved. The preacher clutched his Bible tighter, but spoke no more. The rancher, red-faced with fury, stepped forward. You think you can shame us with pretty words? You think we'll let him walk among us, as if nothing's wrong? No, let him prove himself here and now. Let him stand like a man, if he truly is one. The challenge hung heavy. Not a duel of guns, though his hand twitched near his holster, but a duel of dignity. The rancher wanted spectacle, humiliation, a chance to crush him before all eyes. For a long breath, the lonely man said nothing. Then, slow and steady, he turned his back to them once more, bearing the scar in full light. The room grew silent. No gun drawn, no fist raised. Only the truth of what he had endured. This is who I am, he said. A man who has carried a burden I did not ask for. a man who has suffered in silence, and a man who has survived. If you wish to call me cursed, then know this. Curses do not endure. They wither. They destroy. Yet here I stand, alive. His words were not loud, yet they carried. They cut deeper than anger ever could. The rancher faltered, his bravado slipping. The crowd, restless, shifted again. Some nodded. Some crossed themselves. A few stepped forward, laying hands upon the woman's shoulders, upon his arm, not in condemnation, but in quiet solidarity. The rancher spat on the floor and stormed from the hall. The preacher closed his Bible, his voice hollow now. May God judge what we cannot. And just like that, the trial was over. Not with a gunshot, not with exile, but with something quieter, more dangerous to fear, acceptance. That night, they walked away from the town together. The desert stretched wide before them, washed silver beneath the starlight. He leaned on her arm, weary but unburdened. She carried in her pocket a single shard of that strange crystal, glowing faint as a firefly. They paused at the crest of a hill, the town behind them, the wilderness before. He looked up at the stars, the same stars that had given him only silence before. But now, beneath their cold brilliance, he felt warmth. Maybe it was never a curse, he whispered. Maybe it was a gift. A hard one, a strange one, but a gift all the same. For it led me to be seen. At last, she pressed her hand into his. And I see you. The desert wind rose, carrying their words away into the vastness, to be remembered only by the stars. We all carry lumps on our backs, not always seen, not always spoken of, but they're burdens, griefs, secrets, sorrows. Some believe them curses. Yet sometimes, when they break, what spills out is not darkness, but light. The lonely man was never cursed. He was never marked for ruin. He was only waiting, waiting to be seen, waiting for kindness to find him, waiting for the burden to split open and reveal the strange beauty within. So let this story remind you, wherever you are, do not fear the scars. Do not hide the burdens so deep that no one may touch them. Sometimes, the thing you fear will destroy you is the very thing that shows the world who you truly are. And now, my friends, if this story touched your heart, let me ask, where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments. Share your thoughts, your own burdens, your own light. And if you'd like more tales whispered by the firelight, stories of sorrow, hope, and redemption, then please, like this story, share it and subscribe. For out here in the Wild West, under the endless sky, we are all wanderers. And sometimes, a story is the only lantern we carry.